John Buck and Lorraine O'Donnell, co-chairs of the Data Roundtable. Aki Chutakov, co-chair of the Roundtable on Funding. Katie Lowry and Maggie Severs, who are co-chairs of the Roundtable on Organizational and Network Health. And Maggie Severs, again, who's also going to be the interim co-chair for the Representation Roundtable. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Before I start talking about the Data Roundtable, I want to take a moment to give my thanks, and I'm sure I speak for all of the co-chairs here, to Riley, Susanna, Girtika, and Andrew, and no doubt others at the QCGN for basically nailing jelly to the wall and coming up, going from something very grand but also kind of vague, let's say, and turning it into things that we can collectively organize around and achieve. So thank you very, very much. Our Data Roundtable, John and I have attended a number of meetings with Riley and the co-chairs and also with our roundtable to carry out certain action items. And I'll be briefly mentioning the top three. So the first one is to create a research framework for strategy to support community capacity for data collection and sharing. And as soon as I hear the word framework, I don't understand it, but we did it. So what we did is we created a one-pager, and I'd be happy to share it with anyone by email if you're interested in seeing it, that basically outlines parameters so that as we're trying to figure out how as a community we can share data and act on data so that we can have informed policy and programming decisions made. How can we collect and how can we figure out how people can do that? How can we work together? And what do people need in terms of data? So that was the goal of the framework. And in a sentence, I would say what we achieved was through this one page, coming up with different, I guess, policies or rules to make sure that as we move forward as a group on this project, we leave no one behind. So that racialized communities, communities in regions, communities with different levels of access to internet, people with different levels of comfort for working with data, as much as we realistically can, all of our different community members and groups can work together. So that's what that framework does. I know that sounds kind of vague. The devil is in the details, but we did chew it over and have quite a few discussions. And as I said, I'd be happy to share this one pager with you. The second item is compile and share gray literature. Gray literature is a term librarians use to talk about all of those things community groups produce that are not formal publications, but they're not internal records. Things like annual reports, PowerPoints like the one today, briefs to governments, all of those things are gray literature. My unit at Concordia University called Quebec English-speaking Communities Research Network, with funding from the provincial government, has created a tool called Community Knowledge Open Library, or CKOL. And we're working systematically to approach community groups to see what they produce in the way of gray literature, to catalog it and make it available in a single hub. And again, I can share with you, if you're interested, information. We'd love any group in this room who has not yet been approached. We're doing our best. Please let me know and we'll see if we can get you involved in that project. The third item is maintain, transfer, and exchange knowledge. Again, a kind of huge item. Right now, I don't mean to blow our own horn, but our work at Concordia, I work with a team of 5 others, is to gather knowledge about English-speaking Quebec in the form of research and that gray literature I mentioned, And so if you go to our website, you will, we hope that it serves as a model or the beginning of a model to make that information available to communities. We have a newsletter. If you haven't signed up, again, come to see me. I unprofessionally brought no business cards today, but I know the URL online by heart, and I can give it to you, and you can sign up and start getting the information that has to do with data and research on English-speaking Quebec. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, very much. I encourage you actually to sign up for that as well. It's a great resource, and I'll just acknowledge as well, it's a real pleasure to be a co-chair along with Lorraine. I'm constantly trying to keep up. Notice that as I present today. Good news about the next components of our plan that I'll be talking with you about is that they are in progress. And I really want to take this opportunity today to speak to you about how we are a small and mighty data roundtable that is actively recruiting individuals that are, particularly individuals that have an interest in this area and have some expertise in this area. So please, there are some sessions later that I know are open. Please come and join us, and we'll be more than happy to welcome you to our small and mighty roundtable. On to the next items, identifying gaps in policy and assessing community needs. And not only that, but I think going beyond this, making some recommendations about what we might do about this. So really looking for common ways to assemble information. And one of the great things about our community is how diverse it is and how many different sectors are represented. Everyone uses different information, collects different data, gathers it in many ways. Trying to find some common ways to articulate that, trying to find some ways to work together on that is a really important piece of work for us. And also finding out, the challenge for us sometimes is we don't know what we don't know. And so if we imagine an optimal community, think about this generically, distant from our own experience, but this optimal community, what does that consist of? And do we have all of the policy capacity to be able to resemble a community like that? So working towards that is something that's very important to us. We've had a few opportunities this year, both to create some documents and to identify a framework to work with. We were able to get some questions out in a survey that went pretty far and wide. Got some interesting information, really from 5 sectors in particular, around employment, seniors, education, and arts, culture, and heritage. And we're continuing to work on that. There'll be more to come, of course, as we get through the 2023 year. Exploring models for data collection. Here again, I'm going to put out a special appeal. Today, we're quite fortunate in our workshop that we're going to have Nick Machuro, right at the back of the room, from Aland, speaking with us about a model that Aland has been able to put in place, really linking it. And Nick, I know you'll go into a lot more detail about this, but we're looking at funding and organizations and really how to create links between that. That will be the topic of the workshop that we have today, which is open to all of you. Again, I encourage you, please come to our roundtable. And again, we are being inspired by some of the models that are out there, really so that we can hopefully create something that is more accessible for everyone and something that can be of great benefit for everyone. Many of us are collecting data that goes well beyond the scope of whatever sector it is that we are involved in, or we are doing work that could potentially overlap with some other sectors. It would be tremendous for us to be able to assemble more relevant, more comprehensive, and again, more accessible information that all of us could benefit from. Identifying resources, I'll speak to this really quickly because ultimately we just need to ask you this question as a starting point, is where do you go to get your information? This will come out through surveys that will be conducted, organizations that are participating in those surveys in particular, where we can solicit that information and really try to find what are some of the best resources for us to be going to, but also perhaps try to create some awareness about these great resources and ultimately put that information out there before our community in a way that, again, is more accessible and more useful as we do the work that we do. And the last one that we're working on, not an easy one perhaps, belonging and identity. And what does that mean? And does it mean the same thing to anyone in this room? Maybe, maybe not. What are some of the ways that we can start to speak about that? One of the very straightforward ways we think about is how others start to identify us. Is looking at, for example, English as the language spoken at home. Is that the appropriate way to identify us? Is your ability, and I hesitate to say this, but is your ability, for example, to only access English-speaking schools in Quebec really the indicator that should be used to determine whether or not you're part of an English-speaking community or not? That's up for debate, I think, among all of us. There are a variety of ways to look at that. And so how do we really ensure that we are looking at this in a comprehensive way that's very inclusive as well? Because really, whether or not we determine someone is part of an English-speaking community or not is somewhat irrelevant. What's probably more important is how individuals relate to that and if they feel included in that. So trying to come up with some information that can be quite helpful for us in that regard is something that will be important for us as we move along, and that will no doubt continue to be a work in progress for some time. I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna check in. Thank you so much to John and Lorraine. Thank you. Do we have any questions before we move on to funding for John and Lorraine, the work that's being done on the Data Roundtable? Okay. Great. Well, with that, we will move things over to Aki and the funding roundtable.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Susanna. Thank you, my colleagues from the Data Committee. And if I may, I will also, I'm co-chairing our funding roundtable, but I also need to acknowledge there's an unofficial co-chair, none other than Riley himself. So Riley is the unofficial co-chair of the funding roundtable. If there's any interest, just putting that out there for anybody that would enjoy working with me. We can talk and network, and hopefully, we can have that conversation. So funding, of course, for those of us, most of us, most of our careers in community work, that's really the bane of our existence. So, we are fortunate that on our roundtable, we have a good representation of different sectors. So my organization, we're active in the employment and economic development field, but we have representatives from literacy, from seniors, from youth programs, culture, special needs. So it's really nice to see the range of sectors that are represented. And of course, it goes to the heart of funding, that we know there's a common thread there, that we are all, it's a challenge always to be able to keep our organizations and our programs not only adequately funded, but funded in a sustained way. So what have we done? We had three outcomes that we wanted to be able to achieve in this year. We want to be able to secure support from all levels of government. So we have representatives here mostly from the federal government, but we also, this work has to be done, the conversation has to happen on all levels. We would like our political partners and our funders really to commit to supporting organizational capacity, because that's that's really the big one. Especially in these changing times, we see the kind of challenges that we face on the ground, the kind of specialization that's required from our teams. We need to be able, as organizations, to have the proper training, the proper tools to be able to meet our mandates in today's changing environment. And we'd like to have access to diverse funding, so from all levels of government across sectors. So those are the three goals that we were striving for this year. The first one, we talk about report on funding. This one, and I really encourage, I'm sure most of you have had a chance to look at it, but in the work that we've done with the QCGN has produced the report on community priorities. It's a 28-page document. Over 18 organizations, have been involved directly in these conversations. And what it tells the story, that the issues that I just raised around the needs that we have, especially around core funding, in that report, we really spell those out. And the ask is, as the federal government is putting together its new action plan, which will drive the Official Languages Act moving forward, we as the people on the ground that are doing the work in order to support the goals of the Official Languages Act, this is the level of funding that we need, and within that, again, the emphasis is on core funding. So that report is on the QCGN website. I encourage people to look at it. The second activity, document the funding landscape. Well, all of us, we recognize we don't have the best leads, or we don't have the best information as to where funding opportunities are, who are the people responsible, what are what are the strategies around that funding. We as a community organization need to have more insight on how that works. So what we've done is we said, and again, through the QCGN, through our pooling some of our contacts, we know that we have the list, we know who some of the leaders are around this funding. We have some representatives here today, but we need more than that. We need to be able to also understand how to navigate these funding programs. And so there's more work that has to be done. It's not just enough to have a contact list. We need to have a strategy, and we need to be able to address the challenges that each of us faces in our particular realm. Create a shared position on funding needs based on current inequities. So what we're talking about here is really we're talking about we want to be able to make a strong case for what the needs are in our community. And it's always, this is why the other aspect of the roundtables is for us that the different roundtables, that we work together and that we coordinate, because a lot of these tasks really, there's cross-fertilization between different roundtables. So we need to be able to make the case. And one of the things that we need to do is, and I know for some organizations, it's not always easy to be able to dive into funding issues and budget issues and finance issues. So we really need to be able to support each other in being able to do that, and having that capacity to be able to do the reporting that we need to do, to be able to present the impact that we're having in the community. So the other, I think for the last one, support organizational funding needs, if I'm not mistaken. So supporting organizational funding needs. Again, it's really to mobilize. The things that we've done, we're certainly building on the reporting that we've done, the report on priorities that the QCGN has put together. But there's also another initiative that we're looking at, is we want to have like a case study of what does it mean when we talk about in a particular sector that's important to the community. What do we mean about funding inadequacy? So in partnership with John, SADC, and the QCGN, we've done a case study. We're in the process of doing a case study on the field of economic development. It's, economic development, again, is one of those, vital sectors for all of us as a community. If there aren't opportunities, for our community, for careers, for succeeding in Quebec, then it's going to negate our effectiveness and our vitality. So we are working, and this is again another example of the level of work that is required in order to be able to make sense of government budgets, of making comparisons on spending. So there's a report, a really in-depth report that we have commissioned, all of us, that is in the process of being done. And that report really tells a story of how government funding affects our community in economic development. And moving forward, what can we expect in terms of sustained funding for economic development? But the themes that we're addressing through this report really are common, and they're shared right across our sectors. The other very important initiative was, of course, when QCGN with their partners had the opportunity to sit down with the Minister of Finance, the pre-budget consultations that Quebec put in place. And so, and the Minister of Finance, as you know, Eric Girard, also happens to be the liaison for relations with the English-speaking community. And again, there was a survey that was done to prepare for that meeting, and there's an overall there was a survey, an interesting survey done by the Association of Canadian Studies that looked at the question of funding for the English-speaking community in Quebec, and it was both francophones and anglophones agreed to this proposition that the English-speaking community deserves to have funding that is commensurate with its population. So that's very important. I mean, that's something that we all agree on. It's very good for us, that there is that consensus. And then in these conversations with Quebec, and this is the real ask has been that as the new budget's being put together, as we're having these conversations and supposedly strengthening the opportunity to be partners, we need to have funding that is equivalent to our weight, to our population weight. I look forward to moving on to the next level. Hopefully, we're always interested in having more representation on the funding committee. There's sectors, that we would still like to be able to work with and hear your story. So I look forward to networking. It's a big area, as you can appreciate. We all know what that's like in our respective organizations, the challenges that we face around putting in the right grant applications. Sometimes they're not very, they're not very easy to do. We don't have, not all of us have the resources to be able to do them well to the extent that we need to do them. So we need to be able to change a little bit that dynamic, and most importantly for all of us to have access to the information and the knowledge in order to be able to do the work properly, and in order to be able to make our case to our friends in government. I'm very pleased to see some of our friends and our partners who are here today. These are conversations that we've had with them. Always, had very good openness to these conversations. We have to continue that, especially in this context where we see that everything is changing dramatically in our economy. Just look at the inflation rate, and we all understand what that does to our operating budgets and to our ability to keep up on a host of things, from salary to other activities that we need to do. So thank you very much. Mr. Co-Chair, have I missed anything?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Aki.
Thank you very much.
Any questions for Aki on the work being done? Any questions on the work that's being done by the funding roundtable before we move on?
Just say hi.
Hi, Kevin.
The question I asked you, say about the funding per population base, also giving the 90% of the English-speaking community is in one sector, pretty well the largest four municipalities compared to the regions. Has that been sort of looked at as well, the balancing of, because obviously why, in my opinion, Montreal has always been underfunded, but the regions do have their needs. We can't just go count heads in those communities because they're very small communities.
Oh, absolutely. That's certainly a part of it as well. It goes to the specificity of our community.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, great. So I will turn things over to Katie and Maggie for the organizational and work health.
Hello, everyone. So first, thank you to everyone who has been on the organizational health table and the work that we've done. And thank you to Maggie as well. Before I go into the work that we've done in the past year, I just wanted to mention that as co-chairs, it's a really important part of our role to see the links between the tables and the workings between the tables. So in listening to Aki, I'm sure some of you have picked up on, well, that's related to data, looking at the regions. And in organizational health, that's definitely a point of it. We're trying to get at the crux of what your needs are so that we can then have the conversations with the other tables and be that link between. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to invite you to come forward or come and speak with any of the co-chairs throughout the day. If you are sitting in a breakout room or you feel that it's something relevant to maybe the work that I'm presenting right now, I would be more than happy, and I think we would all be more than happy to get that information and feedback from you so that we can, spread our resources well and make sure we're not duplicating anything and that we're not missing any gaps. So I just wanted to name that as I was hearing it. In terms of the work that we've done in the past year, our table, we have our outcomes here, our actions, the 5 actions here. I'm not going to speak specifically to what we did on each of the actions because our table decided to take approach this systematically. And what that was through the creation of what we called a roundtable toolkit. Thanks to Maggie, who actually built out that toolkit. And what that toolkit was a comprehensive tool to guide the work, the actual work that needed to go forward, from bringing this to something that was a bit vague into the tangible actions and breaking it down really. And it also guided us in how we were going to share all of that work as a table and then to our members. What came out of it after many, many meetings and revisits was an approach to interview and engage with organizations, and ultimately also a survey. We wanted to do this so that answers could be done. It could be relationship building at its core. So ideally, if we could reach out and ask questions to different organizations, we would be starting the relationship building phase, as well as getting crucial information from them. We also decided to move forward with a Google form that many of you, and thank you to those who filled it out, so that there could be autonomy in organizations. We are all very busy, and sometimes you need to be able to fill out and think about these things in your own time. So we really wanted it to be flexible. An important phase of the work as well was carefully selecting who we were going to reach out to first. It can go very broad, and that is the intention. The work here in collecting information is not done, but we were very intentional in who we sought out. We wanted to make sure that we covered sectors, and we wanted to make sure that the outreach was going to be done by the correct roundtable members. If we already had an affiliation or a relationship, we wanted to piggyback off of that. So thank you for all of our members who took on that work. The questions covered each of the action points, in fact. And as we bring that information in, we see that we will be able to respond to these different actions. The survey and the interviews started in February, and to date we have received feedback from over 20 organizations, and most importantly from 15 different sectors. So we're really proud of that work, and we hope that we're going to continue to get more results. And today, it would be really wonderful if any of you wanted to speak to anyone from our roundtable on that, or maybe give the link for filling this out. We would really appreciate it. Finally, the analysis of all of the information that we're getting in, is going to be taking place in year 2 as well. There's an overlap between, so it's not just 1 year ends. I want to emphasize that the work doesn't end. We have that flexibility to keep getting more information in, and we'll keep digging deeper and pulling out the key points. So that's been the work of our table. So I just want to congratulate everyone who has done it, and thank you all for being here. Did you have anything to add on that end?
No, you've done a wonderful job. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Before we move on to representation, any questions for Katie and Maggie and the work that's being done on the organizational network health table? Great. Maggie, go ahead.
Thank you. So I am the interim co-chair for the representation table. I started off with the organization network table, and I think that has really supported me in giving me some ideas and directions to bring to the representation table. You'll see our actions here: increased engagement with individual community members, and I won't go through them all, but I'll kind of break down what we did this year. So. So the first part was to consult with community stakeholders to identify how efficiently and to what degree they're being reached by community action. And when I looked at this first action, I thought, well, who are the community stakeholders and what kind of community actions are we targeting exactly? And I think it was really important to take the time to step back and look at those details, because they can be very broad terms, and we need to approach it in a more specific way to get the information that we're looking for, and then we can branch out from there. This was kind of the same thought process that came to light when we were looking at mapping out where English-speaking Quebecers are represented, underrepresented, or not at all represented in terms of federal and provincial decision-making bodies and other leadership opportunities. So representation can take on so many different forms, and we have these larger decision-making bodies that are provincial and are federal, but a lot of the recommendations that come to those tables and come out of those tables started in the municipal tables, where the MRC tables or the parent group tables that made some noise, and that message was passed on to the next body, and so on and so forth, until it really gets to where it needs to be. And I think that when we're looking at community action, individual action, and getting people involved, with the for lack of better words, issues, or for the situations that we need to address as Quebecers, we need to get people involved on a more personal, more local level, so that our collective voice is much louder once we get to those provincial and federal decision-making tables. So we're looking at where are these opportunities for both professionals within the community sector as well as individual community members. Where can they get involved? Where can they bring their words to the table so that they can be brought forward and created into a collective voice that ultimately we know is going to be a more powerful and representative voice. Sorry, I'm just moving my paper here. So it was a big step in realizing we need to kind of orient exactly what we're looking at. And at first we were thinking about education, and then we realized that we have represented on our table, and for our community we have PERT, and they are involved in employment, as many, not all of you know. And so we have this asset at our disposal. It was a great place to start to kind of approach this mission in kind of a pilot sense, or a model, to create a structure that we know is going to bring the information that we're really looking for. We want to make sure that when we're reaching out to the broader community of partners and individuals, that what we're bringing to them and the questions we're asking them are really comprehensive, so that we're not going back and forth, because we know that we get a lot of that, and then things start to die off, or the answers aren't as meaningful as when you're presented with something that is really comprehensive, to the point, and you understand where this information is going to be used, how it's going to be used, and what the ultimate goal is. So I think that we've made a lot of progress throughout this year. When we looked at conducting a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, so an SWOT analysis, we identified that some of the work that some of the other tables are doing are going to provide us with some of this information, so then we can tailor our approach to that moving forward once we have the collaboration from the other tables and the information that people will already be consulted on. So we'll move forward with that once we have results from some of the inquiries that the other tables are making amongst the community partners. I don't know if I've said anything completely comprehensive, but I'm totally open to questions. It's such a large mandate to look at increasing representation and all of the different forms of representation and roles that people can take on. So it was a year of reflection and creating a structure and making sure we were all on the same page with the approach, so that is the image, the message that we are moving forward with when we're doing our consultations, so that the end product is just as structured and comprehensive, and will have a positive impact on our efforts.
Thank you, Maggie. Before we move on, any questions for Maggie on the work being done on the representation roundtable?
Hi, co-chair. Maggie, I think we all know a fair bit about working with federal and provincial governments, but maybe less so, well, for me, less so municipal. I'm wondering if you can, if there's any progress, or do you have any leads or information on English speakers working in a collective sense with municipal governments?
So, I mean, there are certain areas where municipal governments will be much more involved. There will be a seat around the table for somebody representing the English-speaking community, and that just depends on the particular progress that's been made within that community, that municipality, or that MRC. But where that begins are with the community tables. So there are tables that represent different demographics, different needs, different sectors. And it is a lot of the on-the-ground workers who are a part of these tables. They're representatives from from public health. There'll be municipal or MRC representatives on these tables as well. And these are tables that are initially, as a step one, much more accessible to both community workers as well as community members. There's often a seat on these tables specifically for a community member. So I feel these are the entities that are the first step to for all the voices to be heard, for the larger message to be created, and to have that support and those numbers behind the message that is then going to the provincial table, then going to the federal table. And so if we can start working at that level and ensuring that these more municipal or sector or regional tables have identified seats that they need to fill for somebody representing the English-speaking community, ultimately that's going to help the goal moving along from table to table.
And do I need a mic? Are we recording?
We're not recording.
Okay, so can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to add and that's where you see there's also differences between, you know, the municipal authorities in the regions, right, John, and the city of Montreal and in the urban centers. And I want to share with you that there is this thinking on the side of the city of Montreal, which I'm familiar with, which is the city is very careful about getting involved with any kind of major community social type of programming, for the simple reason that the city feels it's not their mandate. They're not going to pick up what's the mandate of the higher levels of government, especially the province. So there is that reality when we have conversations with municipal representatives.
The question
Yes,
you
go ahead.
mentioned about municipal governments, would that be on the citywide or how about on the borough level, which is more focused on?
Definitely citywide.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Montreal. And
Yeah, Montreal, yeah, but I know that Montreal has boroughs which have a larger
Right.
English-speaking population.
Right, and the boroughs, but the borough, they're small. Yeah, I mean, if again, putting on my funding hat,
Okay.
it's modest funding. It's helpful. It's modest funding. It's a helpful partnership.
Right.
But for most organizations, you know, it's not at the level that they require.
Yeah, 'cause I work with the city of Longueuil, and the city of Longueuil within our borough of Greenville Park, they will offer to the English language community because that is their officially bilingual sector.
But you will hear from officials, used to hear this, maybe my information is not up to date, but used to hear, we have to be very careful the commitments that we make, because this should not come from our budgets. This is the province's responsibility or the federal government's responsibility. Is there anybody from the city of Montreal here? Good.
Great, thank you.
Maybe it should be.
Any other questions?
I do believe that we do have a champion from Sterling County.
Yes. Yeah, oh, individuals, yes.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much to our roundtable co-chairs for that. In just a couple minutes, we are going to break for 15 minutes of coffee. Can everyone hear me? This is okay. Okay. We're going to break for 15 minutes of coffee and networking. But before we do that, I'm going to explain to you how the next section is going to work, because we're not going to be coming back together as a plenary before that. So we're going to take 15 minutes for coffee and networking. And then each of the roundtable co-chairs is going to be in one of, I believe representation is going to stay here, and the other 3 roundtables will be in one of 3 breakout rooms. They all have signs on them, so if you leave the hallway or leave the room, go out into the hallway, you should be able to find. We are going to ask that each of you self-select and go to meet with one of the roundtables, whether it's a roundtable that you are curious to find out more about the work that they're doing. If you maybe feel like you could lend your expertise in that specific development area, or as both John and Aki mentioned, if you are interested in maybe joining one of the roundtables, this is your chance to really find out more about the work that's being done in each of these development areas. So again, it's data, funding, organizational and network health, and representation. In those roundtable breakouts, we will have an hour together. There will be a special presentation by a guest speaker in each of the roundtable breakouts to speak specifically to the work that is being done in that particular roundtable group. And then there will also be a chance to hear from your co-chairs again about what year 2 looks like and what are the actions that we're hoping to accomplish in year 2. After that, we'll have an hour in breakout rooms. We'll come back together for a plenary to share some insights on what we learned in those breakout rooms. So it is now 10:20, and at 10:35, we're going to ask that you transition into your roundtable breakouts, and we will all meet back here at 11:35. Thank you.
Okay, let me just going to share with you my PowerPoint. I don't know, something went wrong with the organization. Okay, Debbie, you're still there. Cannot hear you.
We left the main room and came in here, so
So I'm very sorry for the confusion. Is there anybody leading the meeting? Probably not. I'm going to go ahead, and I was told I have 10 minutes to present, and you have 5 minutes for questions. And I will do my best to do my job here. Okay, so my name is Diane Gérin-Lajoie. I'm project manager for the public service project that I'm going to talk about. And I am, I am not replacing, but representing Céline Cooper, the director of the Consortium of English Language Cégep College and Universities of Quebec. So very briefly, I'd like to remind people about the consortium. It's the union of 9 English-speaking institutions, post-secondary institutions in Quebec. Probably most of you know the organization. And in that organization, the mandate is really to strengthen research and the institutional capacity related to the retention, employment, and success of English-speaking graduates from those post-secondary education in Quebec. So the role is really to try to work at the university and college level to work in a way to support students that are in the institutions in terms of making sure that when they graduate, they're able to find a job in Quebec. And it's all that, behind the idea that we will see that research demonstrates that a lot of youth leave Quebec to go to work either in other provinces or in the States. So that's the mandate of the consortium, to look into these things. So the project that I'm talking about is one of the projects of the consortium, and it's called Soutenir les Québécois d'expression anglaise dans la poursuite d'une carrière dans la fonction publique du Québec. Et the project is a 3-year project that began in 2021, and it is financed by the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise through their strategy d'employabilité. And in that project, we have a partner, the l'ENA, which is l'École nationale d'administration publique. And we have several sub-projects going on, if I can say. During year 1 of the project, we had three research projects going on. The first one was really to try to get an inventory of the existing program in post-secondary institutions that could lead to a career in the Quebec Public Service. Because you know that the representation of Anglophones is really minimal. It's about 1%. So that project is really looking at how we could make things change. The second research that we did was to review the existing literature in terms of research activities and progress linked to the English-speaking Quebec in the Quebec public service sector. And a third study was about doing interviews with recent graduates in administration programs, but in some other programs too, like computer, in English-speaking universities, to discuss with them, what was their career plans after graduation. So these three studies, we have the reports, and those reports will be made public probably by the end of May, beginning of June. And in the same fiscal year last year, we did also, we had a firm that created an e-learning toolbox to inform and support, again, English-speaking youth about the possibility of doing a career in the Quebec public service sector. And this material will be available shortly online at the consortium, but also in CEGEP colleges and universities, again, to promote the possibility of a career in the Quebec public service. And that toolbox, it's mostly presentation of what it means to work in the public service, and information regarding how to apply. So it's very practical, and it's going to be, we hope that it's going to be useful to at least make the youth think of the possibility of working there. Because people have, from the research, people have a tendency to go to at the federal level. But anyway, I don't want to get into too much detail. I didn't even look at my watch when we began, so I should go ahead. And finally, that partnership with LINAP is a 3-year partnership. And in the context of the project, LINAP has developed a graduate level micro program in public administration. And the name of the program is Micro-Programme de deuxième cycle en administration. That program, that micro program, it's 3 courses, will be offered in September 2023, and it's going to be in French. And the offer goes first to alumni from the 3 English-speaking universities in Quebec. We have decided to go with the alumni first because it was easier in terms of organization, if I can say. So the promotion campaign will begin very, very soon. In fact, it's the first time that it's announced publicly, and it will be next September. The September 2023 will be a cohort of alumni. So if in the rooms some people are interested, it would be fantastic to give more information. And in September 2024, it will be offered on a full-time basis this time to recently graduate, like the students who will have graduated in April of 2024, I mean. So there will be 2 cohorts, but the first one is going to be in September, the coming September. So there are 2 information sessions that will be offered online in April, and the dates are listed on the website of ENAP. And to be able to, these are going to be online, and to be able to participate in those information sessions, people need to register. And you have the address on the screen. So if ever you will see when when you click, you're directly on the page of that new micro program. So I hope you have time to take it down if you're interested. And finally, I have, this year we have two other, I call background studies in progress. Again, it's about doing the inventory of some anyway, in the inventory of the existing programs, for example, with an internship component, because we're interested also, the government has the possibility for students to go to do internship. And there are not a lot of students that we see that take that opportunity. So we're trying to understand more that aspect of the internship component at the same time in post-secondary education institutions and at the government level. So that first inventory study is going on right now. Another aspect of that support to students concern the resources, the existing resources to support their French language skills development. And again, we are looking at what's going on in the post-secondary education at that level. And it's the objective is really to better understand what is available and how it is conceptualized, if I can say, at the institution level. But also we are trying to find out, because it's really difficult from the researcher that is doing the research, that how does the government decide on what is the right knowledge of French to be able to work as an employee, but also as an intern. So this is going on right now, and that will probably be available to the public, I would say, probably the summer or early fall. And the last thing that I want to say is that we are doing the inventory of internship, because in the mandate, in the activities of the project, we have to develop an internship proposal. And what we have done so far is that we are suggesting a plan for an internship, but we are talking about an internship in the public service, but with students from the colleges, from CEGEP. The micro program is really targeted the university students, and we thought that it was important to have something going on the CEGEP part. So that internship proposal would be what we have called a pilot project in CEGEP and with the Quebec Public Service. And I have been talking with representatives in CEGEP. They're quite interested. And I also have met with representatives at the Secretariat. And there is an interest, but we still have to, it's in progress, but it's not going bad. It's not going bad. So that's it. I probably went over 10 minutes. Don't be shy to tell me. I know myself, I speak too much. But you have contact, either you could contact Céline or myself if you need more information.
We do have a few questions around the table if you're open to taking questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know at what time we have to, I'm a former faculty at U of T, and usually presentations are very structured, and so I don't know until what time we have to take, but I could take a 5-minute questions, but beside that, I don't know what's going to happen.
Diane, it's Charles Taker from the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. How are you?
Hello, fine, yourself?
Good, good. I have a question. I'm wondering if you have any, have talked about perhaps transferring this also what you learned from this particular project to the federal public service, where I would think there might be even a greater openness to welcoming Anglophones into the public service. Now, I know in the provincial government, you have less than 1%, which are Anglophones, and in the federal public service in Quebec, where I think around 10.4% now in terms of representation. That being said, though, I think there are probably less barriers for an Anglophone to perhaps be part of the federal public service than there would be, for example, in the provincial government. And even the program at ENAP would probably still be as important for them to prepare for public service and employment, one government or the other. In terms of the French, you know, they'd probably be very similar as well. But I think, you know, people like to go where they're similar people as well. And so if you have, in terms of the public, federal public service, especially in the Greater Montreal, there are your environments, working environments where you can work also in English as a language of work. Well, so, and you know, just one last thing. Over the last year, one of the things I've been getting is a lot of calls from hiring managers from the various federal departments saying, Charles, do you know how we can reach the English-speaking community? Because we want to increase our numbers of bilingual candidates. If you can believe this, there's even a shortage of bilingual main-d'oeuvre in the federal public service in Quebec, which I've never heard of before. But also some departments are looking specifically, how do we improve our representation of Anglophones? There's a disparity across the board. So I'm wondering if you will take the learnings from this project and perhaps transpose it to something similar towards the federal public service.
Yeah. Well, if I can say, you know, the project that I am managing, that the consortium has, it's really to work in Quebec with the English-speaking institutions and to help the retention of the students when they graduate, to keep them in Quebec, because, you know, as I said before, it's sometimes quite difficult, or not necessarily difficult, but the graduate prefer to leave to work in a more Anglophone environment, and sometimes the language becomes a barrier. But I think that the mandate of the consortium is really to work in Quebec. And I think that at the federal level, there is more, it's more attractive, if I can say, for students. But that's what the consortium is trying to help reverse, if I can say, and show that it's possible to be working in Quebec also. Because most of the students, and that I'm saying that also from my own research on youth, they're mostly bilingual, not necessarily at the level that, no, I should not say that. They are bilingual, but there is a fear that their knowledge of French is not good enough to be working at the provincial fonction, à la fonction publique provinciale. And it's true and it's not true. I think that there is a big fear factor from their part. And also, even for Francophones in Quebec, the French skills, like the knowledge of French at the writing level or even speaking, it's not necessarily in accordance with their own skills. So the request or les exigences at the level of the French they're not clear, and that's what we're trying to find out. So to make my answer a little bit shorter, I understand your point. I think that such a study could be replicated for the federal level, but I don't think that right now it's not necessarily in the project for the consortium. But again, I'm not the director of the consortium, so I have to be very careful to what I'm saying, because I don't want to say something that necessarily we would not agree on. But certainly the plan is really to really work on the Quebec situation.
So we only have time for one more question, and I do have two, so I'm going to try to make them really short. But the course on public administration is going to be offered in French, and I just wonder if there's going to be support, language support for English students in the French, post-secondary education system. Papers can't be written or exams can't be written in your first official language, but in the English system they can. And I just wonder if maybe that may be a leniency that could be given to students going into this public administration program.
Yeah, we have, there will be some form of support for the people who would register if they need some help. It is not decided to what extent L'ENAP will do something, and how we could also, the consortium, contribute to that support. But we have that in mind, and L'ENAP is open to to, how can I say that, to make it work also. So that's what I can say. But for sure, students, I'm sorry, the candidate that would be, I'm just going to take, I'm sorry, the people who are going to be interested, they will need some sort of, like, they will need French skills in French. They cannot.
Yeah, it's more support for the sector, the professional vocabulary that will be new to some students having come out of a English.
But that is going to be, there will be support for that. But as I said, I cannot tell you exactly what form it will take. And and the toolbox that we have created, then there will not be immediate support for the French skills, but we're trying to put everything coming together, and that question of support will be look at more intensively.
So my second question is more of a comment on the research that you're doing concerning the resources that are available through post-secondary institutions for language development, for French language development for English students. And I would just suggest that you look outside of the educational institutions. There are language support and professional vocabulary support systems that are offered through the community sector that aren't directly needed with the educational institutions, but that are available in certain regions. And those are a huge asset and should definitely be the research.
Yeah, we're aware of that, and it's not that we want to, ignore them, but right now we want to know what is available in the institutions for the students who are in the institutions. But we have also, we're aware of what exists, and we're able to transfer that information also. But for the study as such, it's really within the institutions that we're looking at.
Thank you. So I think that's all the time that we have. Are there any other quick questions, or Eileen's not here to shut us down?
So you were the leader.
Yes, that's what they're telling me. Yes, no, just kidding. We do have one more quick question.
Yeah, Sure.
Hi, my name is Loveness from Zimbabwe Montreal Association. I have a question pertaining to the recruitment of the English-speaking people. Are you expecting them to be bilingual when you employ them for public sector?
I'm sorry, but you need to speak louder. I could not.
Is the expectation that the youth you'd be recruiting to work in the public sector, that the expectation be that they would be actively bilingual upon entering the public sector?
Well, in the case of the internship or if they were looking for permanent employment, as I just said, it depends how you define fully bilingual, and it's really based on what the government is expecting in the employees in terms of the French skills. So I could not say yes, I could not say no, and I'm sorry about that. But for sure, the student who would be interested to do an internship or to find employment there will need to be able to have a good level of French. But again, I cannot say if I would say fully bilingual. I don't want to put any kind of score on the level of bilingualism, because it's really not clear from the part of the government in terms of their expectations.
Thank you so much for your time and for the information. We really appreciate having you here this morning with us.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to go. And it was nice talking to you. It was a little bit confusing at the beginning, but anyway, if you have questions, you can always contact me as the project manager, but also contact Céline, because she is the head of the organization, the very small organization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
But I did my master's in if you could write your papers in English, it was professor. So I did all of mine except for in one course that he wouldn't allow me to write my papers in English. But
I'm just wondering if candidates who go through the program and will graduate, assuming they have the skill set needed for a job in the public service. Or are they going to go through all that work, achieve everything, and then the public sector says, you're trying to find graduation.
You see, I think I'm going to stay on, because that's interesting just to hear. If you don't mind, I'm not like, I don't want to be like a spy. And I will be more an observer. Because you're supposed to talk about the next 5 years, and who knows in the next 5 years where I'm going to be. I'm not the director, but if you exchange on the presentation, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay and be open to see what you think. It's good because, you know, everything is in progress right now, so I could bring new ideas if there are any. But do you mind if I stay?
Of course not. No, of course not. We will be moving on to the next 5 years, though, because I know our timeline is pretty.
No, but okay. Okay, I'm leaving then. Bye-bye.
my question is, why wouldn't we look for the more low-hanging fruit and make success for the federal public service? But that's just me. I was just saying, I was thinking, why wouldn't we look towards the low-hanging fruit? So I think there's a willingness to hire the federal public service. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Quebec public service, I'm not so sure that, like Carol's saying, all this investment of time and whatever, is your language skills, are they going to be good enough? Whereas there is a need currently in the federal public service.
Yeah.
I get calls all the time. Yeah. We've developed, and Tara can talk about this too, we're working with PERT and other organizations to make sure we get the federal public servants announcements out there into the community, because they're looking for some departments like Service Canada, which are in every regional province, are looking for people. I was sent a list like in Abitibi, they need 3 people, and even 2 was in La Madeleine, you know, all these different places. So I don't know, I just thought that might be a lower hanging fruit and easier to achieve success.
Maybe this is a conversation for the consortium and not.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to stick to the agenda a little bit.
Yeah.
Just so we have something that we're talking about for the next 5 years. So I'm looking at the points here. And I think that the one that, how much time do we have? Does anyone have the time right now? Perfect, 20 minutes. So in 20 minutes, I think given, you know, how our first year wrapped up and some of the questions that we have open on the table, here is, now it's out of, now it's gone, is, sorry, I just had it in my mind. Okay, well, we'll go with this one. So shared strategic opportunities become available on boards, committees, and other positions on governing bodies in the English-speaking community, the broader community, and so on and so forth. So where we were initially going to be at was at the sharing of these strategic opportunities, but I think that where we're at is at the identifying of these strategic opportunities, because the opportunities that we identify as being strategic may be broader than what we were initially thinking when we got into this. You know, I kind of, if anybody agrees or disagrees, please, by all means, this is open discussion and just.
I imagine that everybody who sits on a board and is looking for partners or knows at what table they'd like to have a representative sitting at and have like always been sort of blocked. And I think almost every board probably has space around their table where they're looking to bring people in. But there's no basically one place where, let's say, our board can advertise to the whole community, we're looking for someone to sit on our board, would you like to apply? Because then each individual organization can get flooded by everybody else's organization who's looking for representation. So, yeah.
And I think that, so going off of, okay, that's a good place to start, is representation on our own boards, right? And what pool of candidates are we taking these, are we kind of targeting to get these individuals? You know, what kind of profiles do we want represented on our board? And what level of experience do we want them to already have with boards? Because we know that when you have very inexperienced board, that can in itself be really difficult. And so I think that, you know, for example, I think a great example is actually Quebec's system of CPUs. So that's the daycare system. So their board of directors are made up of parents, a community member, and sometimes not. But they're targeting parents right, you know, right there. And that might be kind of the training ground, right? Maybe some of these people have never been a part of a board, but their board has to be made up of parents. So they've got to look with it in that community and pull those individuals out and get them involved. And then when you create opportunities for exposure like that to different individuals of the community, you're opening doors to them and then to us in a sense where, okay, they have that experience. There's another individual who we could leverage their experience and their knowledge and their maybe now developed desire to be involved and get them involved again at the next level and the next level. And I think that finding the opportunities for that initial introductory level of involvement is really beneficial. I mean, just in terms of this course that we're speaking about and being involved in public service, well, here's an opportunity. I mean, you may be out of your education by then, but there's so many avenues to get involved in public service, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be the direct result of your educational path. And identifying these more local, more accessible opportunities to start getting involved, you know, might be a gateway to having more voices around the table, ultimately at higher and higher levels. anybody can cut in at any point. I mean, I don't know what to put on here as of yet, but if we're identifying what these tables are, who these individuals are, how we engage them and get them involved, I think that there's something to be said for boards at, you know, maybe a more local municipal level, and then kind of nurture that development of those individuals to get them involved. And
We're looking at a 5-year plan.
yeah,
Vision. How, so from where we are now in 5 years to have more confidence with everyone being at the table when we want to have it, or have a way of getting them constant.
yeah. Yeah, so because there was another part of our year one, right, that is how effectively is community action reaching the stakeholders now? We look at stakeholders in a lot of ways, action in a lot of different ways, but if we're narrowing it down to getting people involved in these types of entities like boards and committees, councils and so on and so forth, you know, our stakeholders are both those working you know, already involved to a degree in community, and also their neighbors, because there is room for those, you know, there are avenues for those individuals to get involved as well. Something else to consider is that it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the 5 different representatives or 5 different people who have made their way onto some of these entities in their local community are all going to move forth into other tables, but this is just an example. Let's say a municipality, they have 5 different committees, and there's an Anglophone representative or English-speaking representative on each table, and they mandate the chair of that table to go on, because each table, the tables are connected. There's a chair of this table, it's going to go sit on this table, the chair of this table, it's going to go sit on this table, and ideally that message being passed along. So if that English voice is loud enough that rep is going to his table and saying, I can't bring this information here anymore, it's too much, we need a seat for somebody to represent English, because I can't take that on the table, there's too much noise being made, or, you know, within this collection of tables that's being brought to me here. And so then that next entity is going to have to, or ideally after time and pushing when these things work, you know, consider opening up a seat specifically for a representative. Again, I'm brainstorming, trying to put an image together so that we can identify, you know, where are the opportunities for representation for the entry level, for those tables that we need to prepare for, that some of which likely have, that's positive thinking, some of which may have a seat specifically for English speakers, or those that don't really like to develop a seat.
Sorry, I just wanted to note also there's someone in the chat that's, I think, trying to participate.
Oh, sorry,
they're offering suggestions. I opened the chat up, but if you want like the message, if I don't know if it's clear for you or yeah, it's like the bottom 2 messages from Catherine.
No, Pastor
Damn it.
Hi, should I just speak my question?
Yes, yeah, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. Coming here live from the Data Roundtable, but I was really interested in what you presented earlier, and listening to these conversations, it makes me think of these 2 experiences that I've had recently. So I moved into a different city and I decided I wanted to get involved. And one of the things that I noticed in starting to get involved in the different kind of like governance structures of the different clubs and committees that were there is that the city hosts a training session, like a series of training sessions every year for all the people who volunteer, either if they're sitting on tables or if they're in the board of directors, just to level up their skills. So they have, you know, these are small training sessions. Obviously, it's not like a full program at university, but it could be an interesting like entry level point for those who are interested in, you know, as you're speaking like that, what is that first step before you feel comfortable enough? Now, these are offered in French, and it makes me wonder, could this be something that we offer for the English-speaking community? Is this something that could be centralized where we offer this to members of the of this group, of each of our networks, so that they can level up their skills and even start to consider the possibility, right? Because how do we get people, like for students in school, I love what the consortium is doing. For everyone else who's either already working or living this kind of reality, but who has not even considered that opportunity, but given the chance could be able to do it. Anyways, lots of thoughts kind of like sparking through this conversation. And the second one is, I was curious, is there like a mapping or a process where we're gathering these like different levels of tables where there are opportunities for representation? So I don't know if any of you know this, but I work at Learn, and I support the network of community schools, the CLCs, Community Learning Centers. And we have community development agents that act as school community liaisons. And they basically go to some of these very local community tables. And so there is a bit of that representation. Sometimes there's others from English community organizations, but not always. So this just makes me think, like, how do we work as a collective to bring enough of that kind of like weight and clout and voice of the English speaking community to these tables? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that something, I think that mapping is kind of the direction that we need to go in. To a degree, I think there are so many different opportunities that, depending on, how we want to achieve our goal, there are different levels at which we can do the mapping. So do we want to have the names of all of these committees and find a rep within all of those regions that can then, be the owner of those lists of committees and be the one that's kind of pushing them or getting people to get seats and making those waves in the particular regions. Or are we looking more to ultimately the goal is to find out, well, the goal of this year was, where are we represented, right? So then do we just talk to our partners and we ask them, what's the vast list of committees that you sit on? Because I think everybody is sitting on a lot of tables, a lot of committees, and we might get a relatively comprehensive picture that way as well. There might be some left out. What are the thoughts around the table for strategy and really identifying to what degree do we need to identify?
So I think there's different levels. Identifying where we need to be in politics, that's so much easier, municipal, federal, provincial, whatever. Where we need to be in the civil servants, there's a variety of different projects addressing. But I think that just addressing at a very grassroots level, like clubs, committees, neighborhood groups and stuff, encouraging more English speakers to get involved. And to get involved in things that they know about, to care about the environment, the human environment. That's one Anglo voice, among others. Women's groups, all kinds of different groups. People that are worried about the things that are going on in their neighborhoods. Become active at a very low level. And then that's how people get involved in municipal politics, and then eventually in other levels of politics. It's because you fought the condo project that was, being built in the park that your kids need to play in, and encouraging, Anglophones to get involved in the organizations that care about. I remember a former Township Association president made this point about this, Sunday morning quarterbacks or something, and just like, and get involved. And I actually got involved in the Journalists Federation at the regional level, and actually became the president of that federation. And the interests of English reporters and journalists were voiced in a way that they've never been voiced before, just because you're there. Yeah. And if you're involved in, I don't know, your union at work, your social club, like there's so many places where you can get involved and have a voice, and then it multiplies.
Yeah. The thing like with home and school, the parents get involved at the local level, then they might get involved at the provincial level, then they become a commissioner on the school board, and then there's a jump from there to running for MNA, representing the English community, if they get their start for school.
Okay, so what we've been speaking about, we've seen that come to fruition and carry out in our day-to-day, right? That kind of that progress from some of those more grassroots committees, or those committees that are addressing issues that are closer to home, and we get involved because it's personal, and then we realize that we can be involved, for things that are less directly individually personal, but personal, bigger, more sort of the bigger picture. Yeah.
Maggie, I'm sorry, this is, because I'm new here, so I don't want this question to be out of context or.
Nothing's out of context.
And maybe it's better answered in another setting, but my question is basically, my two questions. The first one is, so are you having big challenges with measuring representation of English speakers on boards of directors? Is this the right context of understand this?
Well, I think that in terms of looking at boards of directors, that would be like diving into that would we would be able to create that image relatively easy. I think it's the smaller committees that it would be more difficult to, I mean, identify them all and figure out where the English representation is there. I think that if we're looking at more, regional or provincial boards of directors, I mean, these are associations that we know that we can look up, their annual reports, and we have a list of their board of directors, right? It's the ones that maybe we don't know about, or the opportunities that aren't being communicated effectively or broadly with the general public, that are the places that we need to identify and see what the representation is at those particular tables. As far as I know, because I did come into the representation table a little bit late, there isn't a list of boards that was put together with representation. Can anyone speak to that? Maybe in 5 minutes. But my understanding of why it is that given that we're looking at how effectively community action is reaching the individuals, the stakeholders, I feel like we really need to start there.
Does the Canada Census in any way ask people what organizations they volunteer?
I don't believe so.
No, because that would give an idea of how active they are in their community.
Yeah.
If I can ask the second question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically, whether occupation, you're talking about decision-making positions, right?
Well, ultimately, yes, but in order to have more representation there, we need more individuals around the table, and to be on those decision-making bodies, and to have those representatives and to be effective in those roles, we need these voices as well. Because when we get caught up in just having these voices, but they're not connected to these tables and these voices, we're not passing along the whole message that needs to be passed along. And when, if we're looking at this 5-year project and what we want English representation to look like, not only where we want it to be, but how representative and effective we want it to be, it's where I'm coming from is that there needs to be more at this more like regional level, community level, so that those are the messages that are being leveraged to create the arguments or the cases being put together and presented at these larger decision makers.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but my last kind of comment is you mentioned StatsCan data. I don't think they do explain like what organizations people work in, but they do break down occupation. For me, my research when looking at decision making, it's also boards of directors, but I was also considering senior management positions.
Yeah.
And that's something where there is information about English representation here.
Yeah.
So it's just something like
that.
And I'm thinking there's a lot of different grassroots organizations that are kind of connected to a higher level.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's a lot that are just really truly grassroots, like a bunch of parents in the community get together in order to keep their own neighborhood clean. So there's no way for them to necessarily connect to a wider community, the structure.
Yeah.
So like you said,
and
find out representation on board. Often you can just go to the internet, look up their website and see what it is. But for other organizations, ad hoc parents, much smaller.
Yeah.
And I think maybe from the community level, this program of awareness, because most communities are not aware that they first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that they have to go to reach out for resources for help or for help. So I think maybe awareness programs or workshops or something, but most people, they don't know anything.
Absolutely. So that would play into us looking at strategies or offering strategies to different communities or different entities that are looking to recruit English speaking representatives or just members of the community in general. And, you know, we'd have to look at that issue to be able to provide them a strategy or recommendation on here's how we can more effectively reach out. So we need to be in touch, you know, we need to have feedback from that kind of feedback as well. So how can the communications be more effective with those kinds of tables or those kinds of initiatives where people are getting involved and they're taking it upon themselves to understand what the system is because they have an end goal in mind, and it's something that, you know, the part example that was given something of that nature. I mean, we have these proactive individuals in our community, and you know, often if there's an English representative seat around the table, there's one of how many seats around that table. So all of the knowledge and all of the support that we can give to these individuals with information, with examples, people love examples, real life, you know, this was John's experience and this is what John did and this is how it made John's, you know, reality different or what have you. And that's leverage, there's value in these things that that will make the representation that we do have, that one seat around it, 25 seat table, more effective as well. So when we're looking at representation, these are all things that I'm considering in the process of how we need to do it.
You never managed to write anything down.
I know. I also really don't want to write, so I've done that a little bit. Would anyone else like to write? Actually, in my notes it says, ask Carol.
To write.
Yeah.
We discussed the problem and we realized it is complex.
Yeah.
We need more discussion.
Well, I think that doing the focus study, for example, so here's why, because it is complex, right? So when we're looking at PERT, so if we're looking at employment, okay, you know, we need to transcend sectors, obviously, but they already have research, they have a team, there's support there that can give our table support to get into the next step. So if we're looking at that, okay, well, in terms of employment, what are the different committees that are involved that are employment related, you know, so they'll have an image of that because they have regional tables, they have these, so we'll be able to create what this profile is for the sector of employment, but then likely a very similar image exists for health or for, you know, education. I mean, I think that education is a bit different, but it's quite structured. I think that's why we were going to go in that direction at first, but and then, you know, for those different areas, you know, and whether it's sector, whether it's demographic, whether it's needs related, I mean, those are all niches that overlap and have their own systems of representation of committees that bring the knowledge together. And looking at one that we already have somebody else that they're encadré, like what these things are, is a great place for us to start and get that image and break into that, and then take the knowledge that we can get from that image and use it to support us going forward into other areas. So yeah, really great to have Bert in there. We're done. Yeah, if you not that, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's fine. Cut me off at any time. No, I can.
I've been interested for the idea of federal public service employment. Oh, no. Because I think that's representation.
If anybody is interested in joining one of the roundtables, please speak to Riley and he will connect you with the roundtables.
Super.
Look what's happening.
I'm Nick's in. I've got his email address already. So just briefly before Lorraine gets into some of the detail, I think everyone at our table would appreciate saying this. We heard from Nick as we mentioned he was going to present something. His website, Quebec-aland.org. Vanessa, did I get that right? Quebec. Yeah, just a phenomenal tool that I know Nick can tell us more about. Evidently designed primarily for artists in the arts that would be looking to the provincial funding opportunities. And immediately we were talking about the replicability of this, how it could be useful in a lot of different contexts. I've already had a chance to mention to Aki Nick since he came from the other room, just from a funding perspective. So I think just as an inspiring kind of discussion piece, yes, it is funding related, but it was also about data fundamentally, and also about our capacity to gather information that's relevant for our organization. So just want to highlight that before handing this over to Lorraine to tell us a little bit about a few of the highlights today.
Thanks, John. So I think the main takeaway is that this is a word that I've been using in my own field a bit lately. There's an ecosystem. So there's the data, there's the technology, there are the systems and the kind of nitty-gritty details. But there's also the whole system around data and information, knowledge, research that supports the production and the capacity to use the data. And all of that needs support. I'm looking at our funders. So for instance, someone at the room asked a question, a specific need for StatCan data, and the answer wasn't 12%. The answer was, go talk to Andrew at QCGN. In other words, the relationships matter, and that's part of what we're building here in this room and through this process. I wanted to mention on a completely other note, a very useful thing that Nick said. There are tools. He's using one called Wachete that scan other people's websites and keep track of what's new. Like, I didn't know that. So again, that comes through talking. So that is not data, it's chat about how to get data. Another point, and I'll leave it at this because there's so much more to say. Andrew mentioned we need more forward-looking data. So we're not only trying to capture what has happened and build on 2 or 5 or 7-year-old census data, all of which is useful, but we're also trying to detect trends so that we can plan for the future. So we have to think in those terms too. And as a historian, I find that very useful reminder. We have to look forward. So I'll leave it at that. There's so much more, but the way to find out is by joining our roundtable.
Thank you to John and Lorraine. They've done an excellent job recruiting today. Any questions or comments for the data roundtable?
Will those websites be shared that you talked about? Would we have access to them?
Can we share the websites that were mentioned?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Riley. They'll be shared, I guess, in the follow-up to the forum. Great. Anyone else?
Well, and speaking of sharing the resources, that's fine.
You're okay.
The resources that you mentioned earlier today, like 3,300.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are those accessible? How are they shared?
So I'll ask Riley to compile some. We'll keep track of what websites people have mentioned. We can send it out, or I can just tell you right now. QUESCREN.ca. There you go.
So they're all on the screen.
Yeah. We can talk about how to get it.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, wonderful. Aki, go ahead.
Where's my flip chart?
Oh, I put it away. It's
Oh, well,
there.
see, we follow the rules. The funding roundtable. It said in the rules to use the flip chart.
You're
Everybody.
Right. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to get lost.
You see, so the funding roundtable, that's the table you want to be with. Because we get it done.
It seemed very easy to
Not too. Thanks, Riley. There you go. Well, nobody's going to be able to read it, but I'll put it here. Okay, there you go, guys. Okay. So thank you, Christina. Sophie. Sophie, thank you from Phelps Helps. teamwork. Thank you for taking the notes. Thank you. Helen, of course, was our, where's Helen? Helen is there. Thank you, was our expert. We know that Helen is an expert because we have such a long standing, relationship working with Helen and her team and Tarek at Canadian Heritage. So, so just to give you an idea, Canadian Heritage is a very important partner for our community, as most of us will attest. And Helen provided us with a handout. So this is the level of preparation, and it was great because we were able to really have an important overview of the funding opportunities. So very quickly, here's the question of funding and in working with Canadian Heritage, of course, best practices. What are the best practices? And Helen was very nice enough to remind us what those best practices are. So we're talking about 42 funding programs. We're talking about the focus of official languages. There's two realms. There's vitality for the English-speaking community, and there's duality. So those are the two main streams. Reminders when we want to apply for funding. First off, get some feedback. Helen and the team, they are available to meet with you. If you're interested in putting in an application, they will gladly help you, explain to you how it works. You can bounce ideas off of them. We've all done that, by the way. So we're speaking from experience. Create an action plan. Like this is like a one-pager, to really facilitate that conversation, that informal conversation with the team at Canadian Heritage. Be very careful. Know the basics, which is you're not going to. They have a particular mission. We explain what it is. So make sure that what you're proposing fits into that mission. And for example, you're not applying for sectors that are under other government jurisdiction, like health, for example, and the provincial government. So be very aware of what the streams are at Canadian Heritage. Always, a good policy, and I think we don't need to be reminded about this. Continue to apply every opportunity you have to put in an application. Continue to do that. We finally, there was a very. I'm going to go very quickly. There was a very major conversation, no surprise, around program funding versus project funding, and of course, from the standpoint of Canadian Heritage, it makes sense. Their policy is, they have to have a relationship with an organization. They have to see you in action, build your track record before you can have the possibility of getting funding for your core funding. So it's very important. It's going to be a stretch if you go with an application right from the start for core funding for your organization. You need to be able to, first of all, build your track record and put in projects, and that will get you closer to getting more secure core funding. So the other, we were also joined by a colleague of Helen's, Sylvain. What's his last name? Poitras. Sylvain Poitras, whose role is intergovernmental, and Sylvain shared with us some really great tools. So there's two tools. They're on your website, I suppose. They're not, but we can get them. Okay, but the two frameworks. There's a framework. So if you want to apply for the Community Vitality program, then there is information. There's a framework to help you when you prepare that application. Right. And then the other one, which we're not sure what it's called, but it's around duality. That's the second stream, and there's another framework for so if as applicants, we do have the opportunity to access these tools that will help us, as we put together our application. So then there's two other important pieces of information. There's two inventories that are out there around funding programs, government funding programs for the official language minority community. So one is the federal, and the other one is all levels of government, which is great. So this is the first time we've heard of this. So we have Sylvain was nice enough to put that in the chat. We've got the links to these tools, which we'll be very happy to share with you. And for those who sign up for the funding roundtable, we're gonna throw in some nice pens. Okay. So the last part is really we wanted to talk about moving forward as a funding roundtable. We want to put the emphasis on making our case again. Building on gathering the information. Being able to present what the challenges are in our respective sectors. Where are the funding shortfalls? What are the recommendations that us from our sectors are making to our government partners? So, and overriding all this is, of course, in order to be able to do this work, to do the research, to do the strategy, to prepare proper applications, it goes to the core resources that we have, and the inadequate core funding really holds us back, most of us. So we're still, at that conversation about organizations being able to have the secure core funding so that they can fulfill their potential and we can carry through on our missions. Did I miss anything? Anybody? We're good. Okay, where's the money? Somebody said. That's yeah. Where's the money? Now we can be blunt. Now we can be blunt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Any questions for Aki or the funding roundtable? Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on. Organizational network health. Yes. Hi. Oh, you can flip it the other way. There. Okay. This will co-chair too.
So at our table are your 2 actions really honed in on what we are going to do. Our table has been given the wonderful action of we think, maybe bringing people together. So in year 2, really working on building the relationships, concrete actions, developing a workshop. So we wanted to have shared resources in person coming up next year. So not necessarily surveying or taking in anything more. We want to look at the results from the year 1, take those things, set the priorities, and then move forward with providing an opportunity for everyone to come together and really start building their relationships so that we can enhance our capacity. So one of the key things that I really liked that our table talked about was structuring the engagement moving forward. And what that structuring would be essential to that is using specific language. So instead of just talking about capacity building, maybe talking about bringing people together around the issue and the shared challenge of volunteer retention, so that each of us know that if we're showing up for something, it's going to be valuable and useful to adding capacity to each of our organizations in its own way. So in year 2, our table has a goal to really bring people together and have us start working collaboratively, even on a small thing at a time. Another thing that came up that I would like to mention here is partnering with the Representation Roundtable. There are a lot of things that we could work forward together on this. So the representation, the organizational network and health, I think that if we were to collaborate in looking at those actions, that might be something that we should consider. There is a preoccupation for sure to have representation in the organizations from those underrepresented groups. We're charged with that, so why not bring ourselves together and move forward and make sure that we're going step and step together on that. So that's what came out of our table. Deborah did an amazing presentation with us. There was a lot of concrete things that we're going to put into action moving forward if we get everyone on board here.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions? Okay, great. And finally, Maggie, the representation article. Nope. Just my hand.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. So
you're good.
So we had a presentation from Dr. Gerin Lajoie from the Consortium of English Language Subjects, Colleges and Universities of Quebec. It was quite interesting. She presented us a program that they are working on that is to engage English speakers in employment in the public sector in Quebec. And honestly, I think that it would be interesting to hear from the comments from other people that were there with us for the presentation in the representation roundtable. because I've heard myself speaking a lot today already. But so there will be, of course, made available to the English-speaking community. They're looking at internship programs, just getting the English community more involved in the civil sector. So that's quite interesting. I thought I would share that with you guys so you can look at that in more detail. There was a website presented on the screen, but it went away before I had time to write it down. So maybe we can get that information from Riley at some point. I'm sure the presentation will be shared. And then we had a discussion about, what we're going to be looking at moving forward. And I think that what Katie said is quite interesting about having the network health and the representation work together, because when we're looking at some of these, more grassroots community opportunities for people to get involved and to increase the knowledge of what our system is, what getting involved involves, what are some of the policies or the barriers that we're up against, that we're looking to have an impact on. These organizations that organizational and network health are reaching out to are going to be able to provide us with some of those answers and some of that image. So that's quite interesting. I don't want to talk too long because I know we're a bit behind schedule. So, I'll just say we had a productive conversation. I mean, we identified more areas that are going to have an impact on what we're doing moving forward. So the different kinds of decision-making bodies that exist, typically we think federal, provincial, but there are so many other areas to get people involved, and then how do we reach out to the greater community to get them to commit to being involved at one stage or another. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so before we let you go for lunch, back to the mic just so everyone can hear. So as I've mentioned a few times already today, it is really important that we make sure we're on the right track with the community development plan, and that it truly reflects the needs of the entire community, not just the roundtable members and the organizations of the roundtable members that have been putting this plan together. And so with that in mind, we are going to, we are going to ask you all, we're going to do a live polling as a chance to ask you all for feedback. I will mention these polls, you'll notice there's only 3 questions. They're very to the point. There will be a survey sent out on Monday for you to all provide more feedback on the form itself. But we really just want to check in and make sure that what you are hearing today, what you're seeing in these plans, is in line with the work of your own organizations and the community as a whole. So
okay, so hello everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know there's still some people that are entering the room, but that's okay. I'd like to now introduce you to the facilitators for today's workshop. We thought we'd do something a little bit more fun and participatory for this afternoon. So I'd like to now introduce Katie Lowry from Phelps Helps, as well as her colleague from Phelps Helps, Sophie Nagel, who are going to be leading the Maximizing Your Collective Impact and Creating a Collective Action Strategy workshop. So thank you both for being here, and enjoy.
We were having trouble with that. No, I think we're okay. Everyone, all right, those of you that are joining right now, we kind of wanted to round out the tables because we're hoping to have you work together at your tables. So if you see anyone who's a bit alone, thank you, Aggie, playing it over there. So that they can be a powerful team over there. But if anyone wants to join, so I don't know the host. How's here? Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone, and I know that you have all seen and heard a lot of me today, but right now I'm under my hat of Phelps Helps, which is the place that sits most comfortably for me. So I'm really excited to be here today with Sophie to share what we do, but more importantly, to get you guys thinking and maybe participating and dare I say, like, play along with us. We wanted to create this space for you for 30 minutes, just
Yeah. Can I?
Okay. Is that better? Yes. Okay. I am a bit rested. So we wanted to create this space, kind of 30 minutes for us to collaborate, practice, think outside of the, we're going to go into that a little bit. We will tell you a little bit who we are and why we're positioned here today to do this workshop. But we're really hoping that you will pour in your ideas and just participate and humor us with all of your collective ideas. There's a lot of experts in this room, and we're hoping to learn a lot from you as well. So before we begin, or we are beginning, with on each of your tables, except this table, I didn't know this table was, on each of your tables you will have a paper that says, what is community buy-in? So there's a sheet of paper at the top of the paper that says, what is community buy-in? So for your table, hopefully some of you don't know each other. I'm hoping somebody will just describe, we're going to give you a minute or two to just write down what is community buy-in to you, the organization you represent, or maybe the institution you represent, but all of us, big brains in this room, what is community buy-in for you? So we're just going to give you a minute or two to do that. We need to write one. So about 1 more minute to think on that. We teacher by nature, a bit bossy. Bear with me.
1 minute. I don't know, like putting money into right? We have to write.
Yes.
I think community I think maybe
Okay, we're just gonna let you wrap up that idea, Kevin, if you want to join anywhere. All right, everyone. So a few different ideas I was hearing as we walk around. So would anyone like to share? Oh, not quite yet. Right, so we're not taking these up yet. We're going to ask you to just set your paper aside, keep it close. We're going to come right back to it. Before we dive into what you guys came up with, we're going to share a little about who we are, why Sophie and I are here, and why we've had the privilege to do this. Go ahead.
So as Katie mentioned, we are a small, rural, education-led community organization based in the townships. Stansted to be precise. So do you know Stansted? Has anyone heard of Stansted? Yeah, a bit further down, but yeah. So So the township conjures up images of lakes, the cottage, skiing, all these little quaint villages, but it's not just that. So Stansted, as you can see, is based smack on the border with Vermont. We're a population of 5,500 in the greater kind of Stansted area. It is isolated, far away from services. Montreal is 2 hours away, and Sherbrooke is a good 45 minutes away at least. And that is where many of our Anglophone high school students need to go to get to high school. So some of them are spending up to 3 hours on the bus to get to school. Obviously, this is a huge barrier. So the lack of services and the isolation are big barriers for our community. Added to that, half of us are English speaking. The graduation rate is only half are graduating. So we are undereducated.
In English schools.
in all schools. So it's not just the English schools. And a third of the population are unemployed, so we're poor. It's a poor, undereducated, and largely, like, you know, a majority of which is English speaking. So all these barriers make up Stansted. It's not just that. Good things come out of Stansted, but that is how we are perceived, and these barriers are a big problem. That is why Phelps was started.
So who is Phelps? So that's a picture of 10 years ago. We had Helen congratulating us on our 10 years. We have been around for 10 years. So 10 years ago, those stats came out. I, am an educator first, saw these stats, realized that it was completely unacceptable, and wanted to do something about it, but I'm just me. And so looked for partners. If we fast forward to 10 years, Phelps now offers 6 bilingual programs to young people aged 6 through 30. It's an education and employment support. And we now support over 400 local people in our town. Then and now, we're going to jump ahead to 10 years, and we've seen some big success, which is why we feel that we could maybe lead a workshop like this. 10 years later, we now have 45 partners who are essential to sustain our growth, because as I said, we started out with 1 program, 1 volunteer, and 7 kids scraped out by the end of the first year. We now have 100% of the elementary school students in our town are participating in 1 or more of our programs every year. And perhaps most notably, the graduation rate, which was sitting at about 49%, has now increased by 20%. Now that, of course, needed a lot of help. It's a really complex problem to deal with, the poverty, the unemployment, the undereducation of our community. What Sophie did say, 67% don't have post-secondary education in our town. So valuing education. We couldn't have done it alone. And so we wanted to share with you kind of the steps and the really weird things we did to get everyone alongside us in this mission. In 2018, we were asked by the Secretary to produce a handbook on the models that we put in place to get to where we were. So we've been working on this handbook. It's called Phelps A to Z, and what we're working through today is a part of one of those models, which is the community buy-in model. So we will come back to that, but we do have a handbook available for you.
Katie,
hi.
100% of the students that you now have at the elementary, are they English and French, or just English?
Both schools. Yeah, every single kid who's at elementary school level, we see every week. Yeah. So the model that we are going to be basing this workshop on, and I really want to get into the workshop part because we want you to be doing the work and living a little bit, if you can, the experience that we go through. And what we continue to do every single year is working on forming an impact network. Now, around your tables, we do recognize you're serving different sectors, you're from different levels, you're doing all of these different things, but our commonality is that we care and want to work towards the vitality of our English-speaking community. So we're hoping that we can unite these tables and the work and our ideas together today. And most importantly, there are really no wrong answers in this space. We really want you to just tap into like your creative side.
Okay. So this activity that we're going to be doing has 4 steps. I'm not going to go through them all because we'll be going through each of them. But just so you know, that's where we're heading. So there'll be different steps. The first step. So on your table, you'll see a piece of paper that says define your stakeholders. Do you see that? Yes. Activity step 1. Right. That's what you have.
We wanted to revisit. If you'll hold up with us for a second, before we jump into defining your stakeholders, we want to hear about your community buy-in first. We skipped that step. There we go. So would anyone like to just share what you put down as defining community buy-in? What is it? Yes.
Okay, so we have words in point form.
Great.
Investing,
Investing,
Participation.
participation.
Active support. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Am I going to?
She's good.
Active support. Knowledge. Inquiry.
Knowledge and inquiries.
Tell me if I'm right.
Yeah, and maybe just one more from your list.
Okay, wanting and accepting change.
Ah, I like that. Wanting and accepting change. Anyone else for what is community buy-in?
So I would say the stuff that Dave said already, but to add on to that, we had agreement
Agreement.
and collaboration.
Thank you. Yes, Dave.
We have credibility,
Credibility,
transparency,
transparency,
trust,
trust,
and confidence.
confidence. Great. Did anyone else have anything to add to this very good list already? Kind of touching on those things.
Engagement. Did anybody say that?
No, engagement.
I have one.
Yes, Lynn.
Courage.
Courage. You? Vanessa?
You talked about the concept of sort of neutrality and support for mandate in terms that the mandate is
Okay, mutuality and support for mandate. I think it is.
So that's sort of like what you were talking about, how, you know, undereducation, poverty, and poverty, how they support one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Megan?
You wrote follow-up or like long-term?
Follow up and long term, yep. Yeah, we have lots of good things there. So as I said, you are the experts on these types of things. What we want to do today is building out how to get to here. For collective action, we see it as the foundation is really getting that community buy-in. So then you can create the collective action and a long-term impact. So the how is where we want to focus. So the first step, sorry.
So back to that paper, you want to, as a group, list all of your stakeholders. So your stakeholders are going to be different because you're from different groups, but list them all. Just kind of brainstorm, start to write them down. Stakeholders are those who help you achieve your missions, whether it's your project, in your organization, your work, anyone who is involved and who you need to engage to get that done.
It can be, participants in more of a general sense. For each of you, it might be seniors versus youth versus levels of government might be a stakeholder.
And you have a couple of minutes.
All right, everyone, we're gonna just keep rolling through. So did everyone have a chance to list at least a few stakeholders?
You're still married?
Right? Stakeholders so I heard different groups saying, are these partners? Are they collaborators? Are they our participants? Are they our beneficiaries? All right, so now that we have our list of stakeholders, in your list of stakeholders, part of the strategy that we put in place is thinking about our stakeholders on a continuum of engagement. So I don't know if anyone has done this practice before, but thinking about where our partners, our collaborators, all stakeholders land on the continuum of buy-in. Is this a stakeholder who we want to just have awareness of us? Do they just need to know that we exist? Do we need them to really, really believe in the work that we do because we want to partner with them? So ultimately, for community, for collective action, we want to move all these partners along this continuum. They need to know about you. Then they have to be alongside you and willing to understand, believe in, and want to take collaborative action together. So thinking about the continuum. So what we're going to ask you to do is look at that list of stakeholders one more time. And you have 3
to 5 minutes.
Yeah, oh, no, but
I would say less than that.
yeah, because we're actually really tight on time. But on this, the blue post-its that you have, if you have a stakeholder who is in the awareness phase, looking at that list, stakeholders who are at the awareness phase, stakeholders who are at the will phase are in green, and the pink are the ones that we're really, really taking action with. So we have a tendency, we name all these partners that we work with, but how many are really in the pink? Right? Really question and just map them out.
So when people are writing at the top of your post-it, write the name of your stakeholder onto whatever color they are. And leave room underneath because you'll be writing more. So
a couple of important questions came up. Yes, at your table, you're at different places with maybe different stakeholders. So it's okay if for some, you just come to a consensus on a color. And is it where you want to be with this stakeholder or where you actually are? For these purposes, maybe it's where you really are, because I think the practice, we have to be honest with ourselves of where we are with our partnerships. We look at our partnerships ideally and we have 45 partners. How engaged are they? We only count certain partners that have a level of engagement with us. So I know we're kind of rushing you through this, but we're hopeful that you have been able to assign a color to perhaps 2 or 3 key stakeholders.
Right? You can choose a couple, like 3 stakeholders if you've got that far. If you want to do all of them and you have enough time, go ahead. But the idea is to kind of narrow it down to your key stakeholders. Maybe it would be interesting to challenge yourself on the stakeholders you have most trouble engaging. Those ones that are the most problematic that you would like to work with, maybe you don't, and it's hard.
Yeah, so right now we're going to ask you to select those 2 or 3, ideally, who are really, really tricky for you, because we want you to be able to maybe walk away with some ideas that you can put in place after this. So choose 2 or 3 stakeholders right now from your table, and then we're going to get into actually what is really the meat of this workshop, and where our team every summer spends our time building out the targeted activities to engage these stakeholders, to build these relationships. So has everyone, maybe raise a hand of like, yes, you feel good with the 2 or 3 stakeholder choice, and you feel good about the color that they're on as a table? Great.
So underneath the name of your stakeholders, you're going to list a couple, 1 or 2 activities that you would do to engage them. You would do or you do.
This is where it would be good to get discussion. Don't resort to the things that you've always done. So what we would like you to do is think about how you could really build up that relationship or get their attention in a really different way. If you and your organization has always sent a spring newsletter to make sure people know, maybe there's a different thing you could do than a newsletter.
And the newsletter is important, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, so just think about a different way that you're really going to connect. When you set out that newsletter, does it inspire collective action? Does it bring them to will? Or what are the things that you've participated at or that you've been to that immediately after that, you wanted to work with somebody? How did you interact with them differently? What was in the design that made it different?
Yes, otherwise it was a little short. So, Katie, we'll explain this graph now that you have in front of you, and you also see on the easel behind her.
So the reason to write down these targeted activities is we want to map them. We're trying to map things and map our actions because we also need to know that we are covering as much ground as possible and spending our resources in the best way we can. So the way that we map these things is your stakeholders and the colors that you have. The colors are related to awareness, will, and action. And they fall on here. We have essential collaborators over here in orange. These are collaborators, people, partners that you have to exist. We offer services to kids, so we have to have children participating to exist. A lot of organizations lost their participants, so this is an outreach phase for a lot of them. So it's okay if everything is spread over here because that's where you are, or if you are brand new. We had a conversation with this table. When you're brand new, you're at awareness phase everywhere, right? And the hope for collective action and will, and that's okay too. So on your tables, you actually have a small version of this. I didn't talk about influencers, sorry. So your essential collaborators, your essential partners, without which you couldn't exist. And then there's those influencers, those advocacy groups, those people that give you capacity, those people that help you get your message out there. When you're first starting out, you come to things like this with QCGN so that you know and they help spread the word about you. So that's the influencer side. Examples can be groups that have regional, provincial, federal mandates, getting to know them there. Governments, media sources, those are kind of in the influencer sphere. You can still do your work, but without them, no one knows about the good work you're doing. So in your 2 or 3 that you chose, I would like to hear about where you would place them on this graph. And if somebody would be so bold to maybe come up and place their 2 post-its, perhaps, or pass them to me and I will place them. Anyone? What do you think? You have them. And then the targeted activities towards them. So as I was going around and speaking to the tables, I'm gonna go over here. I'm sorry for the online people. I'm moving around nonstop. Great. Yeah, we need action. Do you want to put them on there? Oh, yeah. Okay, so each of these had targeted activities. So I'm going to share with you just for time's sake, as I went around to each of the tables, I kind of challenged you in, okay, well, we'd like to do an in-person event. Well, what does that look like? How do you make it stand out? How do you make it something that people actually want to come to? And then they feel so good there that they start building collaboration. Rita, you're laughing. But so in these targeted activities that I have up here, so we all want to get action, and maybe we are doing activities that prompt them to immediately take action. Sophie, you had an example that maybe you could share.
So I went to a CDC, like a community groups get together. Let me just think about my example. And it was a retreat. And it was really great. It was a moment for reflection. I felt taken care of, and it was inspiring. They had an outside group come in and do some consultancy on resilience, for example, organizational resilience. So that was a moment, and it rose awareness of the other people. And then they followed it up, and the will, actually. I wanted to be part of this group more because it was well organized, it was well executed, and that makes a massive difference when you know that the next one is going to be most likely just as good. So the action part was this follow-up meeting that they had. They made everyone pick out a name of another organization, so a peer. And the idea was to do something nice for them over the holidays. So it could be buying a box of cookies and delivering it to them, or whatever, anything. And it really, little things might seem a bit silly or non-important, but they do take that's an action. So getting to that action point was, you know, made me feel even more part of that group. So it's an example.
They took the idea of the forum and then they kept pushing it towards so that it would have actions within that carried the people throughout the continuum, just through one event. Because we all have limited resources, so we want to maximize how we can do it. So we talked over here about an individualized approach to each of those partners, and that's like a low cost addition to an event that becomes very individualized and very personal. Here we have a lot of different ideas of the stakeholders wanting to get towards, you know, there's in-person stuff, there's fun events, but I would really challenge you to look at like what makes that event fun. Like dig a little bit deeper. We don't have time for it, but this is what the exercise is really about, making those targeted activities in those ways. For Phelps, this is an example of what we do and why we've been able to go from 7 kids who really hate school to 400 kids who so like school, but more importantly, parents that like force them to come. The first 2 years, parents didn't get out of their vehicles if they came to pick up their children because they were embarrassed because they didn't have any education. To now they walk in the space, they have a cup of tea while their kid finishes up their math. They have ownership of our space, our organization, because we host a softball tournament every year. And we play softball with them and we serve them beer sometimes. And we interact with them and we get sunburns with them and we invest our money, our time, and it's built into every single one of my staff's job description to attend our softball tournament. And, you know, the staff knows that ahead of time, so we get a particular brief in our organization. But it's an example of looking at things differently. We participate in the local bowling tournament. We're terrible bowlers, but we get to be with the parents and then they get to talk to us about their kids in a non-threatening environment. So to really think about doing things in a different way without just our AGM or tables or our newsletters, you know, go on TikTok and make silly videos. Humor the people around you. We have a fun run coming up. We're doing a color run this year to celebrate our 10 years. So instead of the best way we thought to celebrate our 10 year was a barbecue and a fun run. And CDEC, for example, is entering like a team of runners because we're collaborating with them, and anyone else can too. You can walk it. But these are the kind of things that we wanted to share with you.
Which brings us on to step 4, which is not so much a step as to me saying something. It is knowing also that once you have got to the point of taking collaborative action or any of the exercises that you've been doing, that they have to be maintained, obviously. You can't just let them, you know, you've done the good thing and then you'll do the good thing again in a year's time. You have to keep it going and it has to be consistent and it takes time. And like thinking about it, so creating calendar memos or whatever to just keep with the consistency and nurturing those relationships. Like anything, they have to be nurtured. The work is not done. It's always more work.
So the key takeaways, and we're going to wrap it up really quick. You all know this, but please, we encourage you to set aside the time, the money, the strategy, the reflection to have these innovative things in your organization, and especially coming out of the pandemic, people are so open to just do things differently. I really believe that. And so to challenge ourselves to engage our community, especially English-speaking community that's kind of disappearing and hiding sometimes, really think about drawing them out in a different way. And if you can, in that funding, in those frameworks, in all of that, set aside time and money for it for each of your staff, because it's such an integral part of moving forward and growing. We couldn't have done it without it.
And I think it goes back to what Laura was saying at the beginning about all of these things build trust. And it's kind of the foundation of being able to grow. Quick plug for our handbook that we talked about at the beginning. So Phelps A to Z is a handbook. We have laid out 10 models on our best practices. So what we did to make Phelps what it is. We're still very small, we're still very local, but we have known quite a lot of success in our area. So how did we do that? We have a handbook that you can download for free on our website. If you go to phelpshelps.ca, Phelps A to Z, you'll see it in footer. You go on there, you can download it, and that was.
And it's especially tailored to rural communities. There's not a lot of necessarily that representation here, but if you work with somebody who's in the rural communities or rural sectors, that's who the handbook is really for.
And I think everyone would find something, even if you are, city-based. How do we do our fundraising? How do we do our communications? There's something for everyone.
Who put it together? The handbook.
Staff and the board.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
Really.
So since you're doing so well, and you're not only changing every 10 years, do you see a time where you will have less kids and less people because you have changed the community and there will be more interest in education? Do you see it?
Yeah,
where you
so I want to work
obsolete
myself out of a job, absolutely. Absolutely. However, you always have wonderful surprises like a pandemic. And our kids are reset and our families are reset to a little bit 2012 when we started. The difficulties are there. So unfortunately, probably not, but that is the goal and you aspire to have less and less. And what's interesting now, we have our students currently, we have 3 of our former participants employed in our organization.
That's exactly
so that they're resetting it and we're breaking cycles. So that is the goal. So not me, but for them to continue the work. It's more passing the torch is the goal. I'm just gonna leave them.
Sure, yeah, if we don't, Okay, thank you so much to Katie and Sophie from Phelps Helps. That was really wonderful, and the work that you're doing, I myself find it very inspiring, and it was so lovely to hear about the impact that you've made on your community. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. There has been a slight change to our schedule. We are going to, I'm going to bring back Riley shortly, and he's going to give you just kind of like some highlights of next steps for the Community Vitality Roundtables and the Community Development Plans. We will have our closing remarks from the forum, and then you will be invited to stay behind and network with your colleagues. There's some delicious looking snacks at the back and more coffee. So we do encourage you to stay around and continue to chat, but we felt it was probably easier to close things up now than release you all and then try to round everyone back up again. So with that, I will turn things over to Riley to go over next steps.
Thank you, Susanna. I want to take the opportunity to say thank you once again to everybody here. It's been a really productive day. And I know for a lot of us, it's been a long day. So I really appreciate everybody who's still in the room with us. And a special thank you to Katie and Sophie again for that really great workshop. In the spirit of today, it really was something different than what we usually do. And I'm looking forward to having a good look at this poster here. So all I would like to do right now is just speak very quickly to some of the next steps in this process. And this is, again, it's really special for me because I've been involved with this process for a long time. And I'd like to talk about what the QCGN as well is going to be doing in terms of backbone support. So the very first thing you'll see that there's a couple of steps. We're working hard to make sure that the roundtables have an annual, more or less of a schedule that they can stick to. That's going to follow each year of the community development plan. So the very first thing is come Monday, we're going to send out that satisfaction survey. Like we said, so we can speak a bit more about how everyone felt about today. Later on in the week, I'm going to send out something to everyone with all of the information and the links and documents that were shared because I think it's going to take a little bit of time to compile that, and I want to make sure that everything that was requested gets received. The next few months are going to be critical. So I believe that the federal budget is now, we're expecting that's going to happen at the end of the month. And following that, we're anticipating that the action plan for official languages, the next iteration of that action plan, we'll know more about that certainly by the spring. So what's going to happen is, now that the first year of this community development plan is almost at a close, we're going to take all of the insights that were shared today and compile that into a report that's going to be publicly available. We'll be posting it on the QCGN website sometime in the spring as well. We're going to have to wait until the end of the year to make sure that we get the final results of all the actions. They're still ongoing. So within about a month or 2 months, we'll be making that report available and distributing far and wide. And that's going to essentially reflect on everything that was contained in that first year that we reviewed earlier this morning with the roundtable co-chairs, and provide a little bit of a snapshot of the work that has been done. At the same time, we'll be gearing up for certainly a very busy period where there will be a lot of dialogue with the federal government with respect to what we're going to see in that next action plan. And in June, the roundtables will meet again, and we'll work to identify the annual development priorities. So many of you are familiar with the annual priorities, but this is an exercise that's done every year in order to inform the Department of Canadian Heritage, as well as other federal and other government partners, of what the community priorities are, which serve to influence those funding decisions. So we'll be hard at work over the next few months preparing for that. In the fall, there will be a mid-year point for the next year of the plan. So the year 2 items that we got started on today, we'll be convening the roundtables to take a look at that. And then the plan is to have the roundtables meet probably every 2 to 3 months or so. Following which, at around this time next year, we'll have another community forum. So that's the plan to go forward each year in order to track the progress on the plan. And if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to end with this. We have printed copies of this as well. And this is the priority setting model that was developed for Quebec's English-speaking community. So in keeping with the themes of the day, the collaboration, the trust, and the collective action, this model represents the various gears of the community working together in order to achieve the shared desired impact. So you have the roundtables in the center. You have, of course, the community on the left-hand side, in red, and then you have also the public partners in blue on the right. And there at the bottom is the QCGN in orange. The QCGN is very proud to occupy this backbone role to the community organizations and to the community development plan. But we want to reiterate that this is always, first and foremost, this is a plan that's owned by the community. And I believe that's been demonstrated today in the work that we've shared, and in some of the things that we've learned. That the QCGN's role is to continue to help do what we can to keep those gears turning. But this is only possible because we all come to the table with our ideas and we all buy into this model. So we have printed copies of that document. I really encourage you to grab a copy on your way out, because I think it illustrates very well how we work together and what this is all about. So I just wanted to leave you with that for today. I want to say thank you once again to everybody who's here. Thank you to the roundtables, to the co-chairs. Thank you also to my colleagues at the QCGN, who provide a lot of the essential support that I would not be able to do my job without. And I would like to wish you all a very excellent day, and give things back to Suzanne.
Thank you, Riley. All right, well, that is it. We will have, we'll bring back Sylvia for some closing remarks. And before doing so, I also just want to say, extend my gratitude. It's been such a pleasure for me to be able to facilitate this process with the community roundtables and today here with all of you. And so thank you so much to all of you again for your eager and enthusiastic participation. And I will now give the mic back to Sylvia for some closing remarks.
So I had remarks, but they don't seem appropriate anymore. So I'm just going to tell you how I don't get out a lot. I don't get out a lot to talk to people, to see people, to connect like I did today. And I hope you feel the same way. We had a great day, I believe. We had, I learned about we're lacking in trust. We'll have to work on that, certainly in our own employment reviews. I learned about this wonderful model and how we're trying to make ourselves obsolete. I don't think that's going to happen in the English-speaking community. I really don't. There will be always work to do. And Riley has said it. Behind Riley and me right now up here, there's a group of people, that some of them are sitting here today in the QCGN, and the board, our board, who are committed to make this program of roundtables work. So, but we need you, and we need the people who you will also mobilize. So you've got to go out there and spread the word around bringing more people to the roundtable, more sectors. We'd love to see institutions here, institutions, the healthcare institutions, the education institutions, sectors, other sectors. I was just reflecting today, we don't have a women's group, an English-speaking women's group. So we have to start to work on our infrastructure, on our representation, and you folks are the folks that are going to make it happen. We'll help, we'll be there, but you folks are the folks that are going to make it happen. So we depend on your involvement, and you can depend on us working as the backbone organization. Thank you, and have a good rest of day and weekend.